Hello, AP World History students. Mr. Lassiter here with you, and we are about to start this live free session here on Fiveable, looking at an overview of the AP World History exam. So whether you were watching this live or you're coming back to this because your school might start a little bit later, in this video, we hope to give you a solid overview of the AP World History exam and a few tips along the way so that you know what it's about. So far, we got about a dozen people around here. If you, just to double check, I had some mic issues last week. If you could hear me, go ahead and just throw something in the chat and that'll let me know. But we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the offerings Fiveable has coming up, and then we will jump into learning about this exam. So I'm going to be kind of moving to the corner here momentarily, and we will be taking a look at the AP exam. So let's get started with that. Oh, it disappeared. All right, I see what's going on here. Got to move it to the same desktop. All right, there we go. Let's see if that will work for us. I've never had this happen before. Just 1 second and I will have us up and running. I have to share it again. There is a poll there. If you can fill that out for me, there's a couple things that I just kind of want to know from you so that I can basically tailor this session to you as much as you need. And that is to tell me, well, one, have you started school yet? Are you getting into the school year already? Or, and then the second part is, what are you most concerned about in the exam? So just throw your vote in there and that'll help us figure it out. Seems like a lot of people are already back in school. I know there's a whole area of the country that is kind of lucky in some respects. They don't have to go back until after Labor Day. Myself, we've been in school for about a week at this point. We just had our 5th day of class, so that's pretty standard around here in North Carolina. But we're going to be looking at the AP World History exam today, and let's go ahead and start talking about those basics. And then as we go, I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions today. Again, this is a production of Fiveable, so follow Fiveable at Think Fiveable. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. So go ahead and take a look at us there. And we have a lot of events coming up this week. On the 21st, I believe that is tomorrow, we have an intro to sourcing analysis, which will be really important for developing some of those early skills in the course. And then a section for teachers on teaching Unit 0 coming up on Friday or on Thursday. And then this Saturday, our students, Charlie, will be introing to AP World and talking through the student experience. So let's go ahead and get going. What we're going to be doing in this section is a quick overview of the exam, thinking about what is tested on the exam, as I can zoom out of this so that we don't have that blocking. Thinking about exactly what we're going to have on this test. Sorry about that. As you can tell, you might be able to tell, I'm on a computer right now, which is not as friendly as my typical computer. So if I can get this presenter view, you might have a better time on this presentation. So let's see if that gets us back to where we need to be. Anyway, so we are going to talk about this exam and exactly what is tested on it. There we go. I think I'm finally in a position, y'all, to get this done. We're also going to talk about stimulus-based multiple choice questions. Of course, short answer question, based question. Those are the sections of this exam, or the 4 parts of the exam. So we're going to go through those in detail. Before we do, let's just look at this overview of the exam. First and foremost, remember that the AP exam is about assessing historical thinking skills and learning objectives. As much as we might get overwhelmed with the content of the course, that is not necessarily what the test is looking for. Certainly, you must know some content. That is very clear. The test itself is, one that you have to know stuff for, and that's pretty much that. However, the skills that you learn, the overall trends that you learn, those are the learning objectives and the skills of thinking critically, identifying changing continuity over time, or comparing different eras, or understanding causation. Those are the historical thinking skills that are going to be assessed in this class. And that's what the test is aimed at, really working with those skills and assessing them. And it does this in 4 ways. The first section is multiple choice. That is 40% of the exam. It's the largest single section. It takes about 55 minutes to complete. It used to be, in the earlier test, weighted a little more heavily, but the shift has been towards skills and writing. We've seen be reduced in importance, or in percentage of the overall. The short answer is part B of section 1. So you'll do the multiple choice, you'll follow immediately with the short answer. It's worth about 20%. You'll answer 3 questions there. And if you're thinking already, man, that's a long time to be sitting still and answering questions, you get a short break after section 1 of the exam. And section 2 of the exam are the essays. And that is where you will write your long document-based essay and your what we call the long essay question that is not document-based. But you do get a choice in the long essay question. I want to note, and I will mention again later, the DBQ is weighted more heavily than the long essay question. So now, if we generally have an idea of what the test consists of, and again, we're going to go a little bit more in depth with that momentarily, we also want to think about what is tested on the exam and how much. Right? I told you it's a test of skills and learning objectives, and it's ideally, if you know a trend that occurs in one area of the world, you will also be able to identify that trend in another. But to be fair to all the periods that are covered in this AP World History Modern course from 1200 to the present, each time period is weighted a little differently. For teachers pacing out the class, for example, somebody like me, this is how I decide basically how many days we're going to spend on each thing or each set of content. For students, it might be fluid how much you should study each time period, although studying really should be personal to you and depending on what you need the most. So if you take a look here, the new course is divided into 9 units, and each unit corresponds with a time period. And the first time period is 1200 to 1450. It's a portion of what we used to call period 3 in this course. So if you're on YouTube and searching for stuff on period 3, anything that's 1200 on will be covered in period 3 up to 1450. But that is split into 2 units, about 8 to 10% each. That means the unit itself is about 16 to 20%. 1200, 1450, 16 to 20% of questions will come from that time period. And that's across the whole exam. That means multiple choice, and it means your short answer and DBQ questions will come from those units. Then unit 3 and 4, you see a slight uptick there, 12 to 15% for unit 3, 12 to 15% unit 4 with land-based empires and transoceanic interconnection. It's what we used to call period 4 in the course, 1450 to 1750. And it makes up a larger percent of the test. Somewhere between 24 and 30% of the questions will come from that time period. That is the time period of European exploration and colonization. Also, you'll see some powerful empires in China and India with the Mughals, etc. So moving on, Unit 5, revolution. Unit 6, industrialization. Those are captured from 1750 to 1900, or what we used to call Unit 5, for any teachers who are perhaps adjusting to these new courses. And that makes up, again, 24 to 30% of the exam. And then 1900 to present, same thing, 20 to 30%. Although that unit, that last time period of 1900 to present is split into 3 units, each 8 to 10% of the exam. When you're studying, this is something that I think is helpful to know, so that you can adjust as needed. So from here, we want to think about what is our plan of attack. Well, we know there are 4 sections in the exam. And so for each one of these, I want to spend some time and talk about what is in each section, what does it look like, how is it graded, and then some basic strategies. So we're going to try to hit all 4 of these things with each question, and hopefully make you understand that everything is fine, even if it might feel a little stressful through the course. So we're going to start out with the stimulus-based multiple choice question. And the survey, it's pretty split evenly. Everybody's worried. It has a little bit more, a little worried about it, just because it is the section that is graded the highest percentage. But it is a section where you're not asked to memorize stuff and be able to regurgitate it by looking for the answer choice that matches. It is the first thing you come to. So one of the benefits of the stimulus-based multiple choice questions, or multiple choice for short, is that you're going to have the most energy when you reach this part of when you're doing this part of the test. Although it is 55 minutes long, 55 questions, so you have to keep a good pace. Some of you will find in the beginning of this course you might be worried about time and pacing, but that will come with the course. It is 40% of the score, but every single multiple choice question is paired with a stimulus. And there's every stimulus, which could be primary source, or secondary source. It might be a piece of writing, literature. It might be a poem. It might be a collection of those. It might be an image, multiple image, map, chart. So pretty much everything that you're going to look at in your course and try to analyze for data information, for change in continuity, those are multiple choice questions. But the good thing is you get to use those to help inform you about the question. So you're going to be practicing skills over and over again in this course that then you will demonstrate in the multiple choice. And I will say, whether you ever get multiple choice, nobody rates better than the AP World History exam. So let's talk about some tips for the stimulus-based multiple choice question. The first thing is understanding how it's graded. Now, there are some standardized tests that will say that you are penalized for guessing. So you might try to answer all the questions you know or you think you know, and if you're not sure on some and you can't get it down to 50-50, you might just leave it blank and it won't count against you. That is not the case with the AP exam. The AP exam, there is no penalty for guessing. You need to answer every single question, even if you get to the end of the 55 minutes and you have 4 questions left. Pick a letter, whatever you choose, A, B, C, D, doesn't matter. I usually go with B, and just answer that the rest of the way down the page. That is going to make the difference for you. Say you have 10 questions left on the test and you just ran out of time, you got really bogged down, you lost track of things. If you answer the last 10 questions with the same answer, you're likely going to get 2 to 3 of those questions correct. And 2 to 3 questions can make a difference in your score in the end. So No points for leaving blank answers. So why leave them? Make sure you fill everything in. Everything else, of course, you're going to attack. Be on the offense with multiple choice. Don't sit back on your heels. That's, as the football coaches always tell you. Always read. When you attack the course, you don't necessarily have to start by reading that long paragraph. You may get an example of a source that is pretty long, maybe 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, or maybe there's 2 sources together. First, look at the sourcing information. Who wrote it? When did they write it? Where were they? Get the gist of what's happening. If you know who wrote it, you know when they wrote it, then you can think about the context of the question. And you may find that if you're reading a source, say, written by a Muslim scholar in the 1100s, talking, during the Crusades, well, your brain should start thinking, what do I know about the Crusades? Of course, that's outside of the time frame of this new course, so that's just an example. So think about the context and get your cogs turning in your brain before you try to tackle the source, right? Understanding the source of the information will really help you narrow down some answers. Then preview the question. You do not want to read the source without knowing what you're reading for. Sometimes the questions will tell you where to look. There might be 2 sources that would say, in source 1, paragraph 2, the author intends or is trying to persuade what audience. And there might be some evidence there of what he's trying to do, she's trying to do. So if you can read the question, you can read with purpose. I can't count how many world state multiple choice questions can be answered without reading the entire source. And some, obviously, you will have to do. That is for sure. Some of them you can speed things up by reading with purpose. Also, your answers down. Throw out one answer wildly up the base. You can throw off another answer out of the time period. Get it down to 50. You're going to have a really good shot on this exam. And of course, if you are still in doubt, you get those answers down, not there, go with your gut. Especially if your gut's telling you something, don't go against it. There is research to show that over the course of your life, you always stuck with your first gut instinct, an educated gut instinct, that you're more likely to be right in your instinct. Changing your answer, for example, you're more likely statistically to change it from a right to a wrong answer than from a wrong to a right answer. I know it's really weird, but that's the truth. Another thing I want to say is, why do I say, read the source of information for first, think about the context, previous questions, and then a lot of times when my students are taking this, especially early in the year, they will want to just read the test in order and read that source and read the source of information and find out who said the thing they just read. And then they're going to read the question and the answer choices. But once they get to the question and answer choices, the next thing they have to do is going back and reading the source. Well, that doubles the time. So you stick to some of these tactics, you're going to be in good shape. I do have an example of stimulus-based multiple choice question here if you want to kind of generally know what it might look like. I haven't done this with everything on here, but feel free to guess it along at home or put it in the chat what you think the answer to this might be. Although if you haven't had the course yet, it might be a little bit difficult, which I completely understand. So with this question, you have a chart, and since I'm looking at sourcing this chart, I want to think about, all right, what is the chart saying? Well, here you have world distribution of deaths from malaria in the early 20th century, 2010, right? So malaria-related deaths in millions, 1900 to 2009. I'm not going to do any more of that. I know what this chart is showing, but I'm not sure what the question's going to ask yet. So I'm not going to waste time trying to understand things of the chart. It may be about the chart. It may be asking about trends in the chart. And I forgot what question I put in here. So let me see. Which of the following is the most likely explanation for the overall trends regarding malaria deaths depicted in the chart? So what I'm looking at here is the overall trend. You had 3 to 4 million people dying from malaria in the first half of the 20th century, and now you have less than 1 million people dying from malaria. However, we're seeing larger numbers dying in Africa, but an overall, since it asked the overall trend, we have an overall downward trend. Okay, so keeping that in mind, that's what I want to look at. I've looked at that chart, and I need to look at the correct explanation for that downward trend now that we have identified. The risk of all diseases declined as a result of modern global migration trends. All right, so does that fit with what we know about world history? The increased production of genetically modified agricultural products in regions outside of Africa, that probably doesn't have anything to do with malaria, increase in genetically modified products. The rise in global temperatures, well, presumably that would decrease in mosquito and illnesses passed on by mosquitoes. The availability of medical innovation to increase the rate of survival. And D here is our best answer, because we see medication that treat and prevent malaria, medical innovations that can prevent malaria. And so generally throughout the world, because of those innovations of the 20th century and medicine in the 20th century, we're seeing that downward trend. Now, the follow-up question might be, why is there an uptick in Africa? And that might be as a result of population growth, et cetera. Now, at the beginning of this year, there's no reason why you should know the answer to that question, but you will get to that at some point in your course this year. Get technological innovation in the 20th century and talk about that, how that has affected demographics and health around the world. So that is just kind of an example of a question. I didn't understand every single thing about the chart to answer that question. I just need to know how to read it with purpose. All right. So that brings us to our second thing, and then I'll open it up to questions after we get through the SAQ, and then we will come back and do a little bit more after we answer a few questions. So the short answer question on this exam is also in section 1. So as soon as you finish the multiple choice, then you will begin this short answer question section. They'll have a hard stop, have you break the seal on a new booklet and do all sorts of things. For the short answer question, you're going to answer 3 questions. However, it's out of 4 choices. The first 2 you must answer, and the second 2 you get to choose the one you know the best. So you get 3 questions in 40 minutes to write. The 40 minutes, that breaks down into 13 minutes per question, thereabouts. Although you might find that some of the questions might take a little bit longer because they have sources with them, or you might just know better than another. Overall, it's 20% of the score. So those 3 questions make up 20%. So that's roughly 6% per 6 and a little more, 6 2/3%, something like that per question. So that's a pretty hefty chunk for something that doesn't require a ton of time. Now, there are some varied styles here in how the questions are asked. So keep that in mind. And we're gonna look at some of those right now. Question number 1 on the SAQ. And this is prescribed by the College Board. If you look at the course description from the College Board, they go ahead and they tell you this up front. There are no surprises at all in this exam. There should not be any if you understand how the exam is structured. Question 1 will have a secondary source stimulus. So it'll have some sort of historian writing, somebody like that you might be familiar with or not. In past years, I've seen some examples with stuff from Jared Diamond and other historians. I'm hoping that they put some on there by Damon Imawara this year. He's got a really great book out. So you have that secondary source analysis, and then there'll be a question that builds off of it, asking you, most likely, to identify or describe something that would perhaps agree with the source, and then maybe describe or explain something that might disagree with the source. And then the third part of the question might ask you to extend beyond that source. That would be a typical question. Question number 2, you must answer as well. It is a primary source stimulus. It can be an image, or it could be a written account. And it would basically ask you the same thing. Identify something that you see in the source, a trend in history, identify an example of it, and then explain the process and then connect it to another time period. And those questions can be from any of the time periods. So questions 1 and 2, from 1200 to 2001, they're going to be from any of them. But questions 3 and 4, that is where you get your choice. And the reason I give you a choice is because there's no stimulus to go off of. This is a question where it's coming from your brain, from what you remember, the trends that you can recognize in history, and the evidence that you can bring forth from your study in the course. So there's no stimulus. However, you do get to choose which question you know best. Question 3 will come from the years 1200 to 1750, and question 4 will come from the years 1750 to 2001. So the first half of the course, the second half of the course. And let me tell you what, answer these questions based on what you studied. I studied 1750 to 2001 way more than the other. Literally, answer the question that is easiest. You don't get bonus points for doing the harder question. You don't get you certainly can't answer more than one question. They'll just answer whatever question you put, the sticker you put on your book. So there's no bonus. Answer the easier one. What's easier? It's up to you. It really depends on what you think. So choose the one you know best. I am the kind of person, when I take a test, that I typically attack questions in order. SAQs do not have to be answered in any order, or do not have to be answered in the order that you come to them. You could do question 3 first, and then go back and answer questions 1 and 2, or you could answer question 2, and then you might choose 4, and then go back and answer 1. It's really up to you, but you do need to make sure that you're taking your time seriously. You're paying attention to it, because you can get bogged down in the question, and you don't want to do that. So pay attention to the time, and pay attention to what you're being asked to do. I'll do that in the next slide. Each question is graded on a scale of 0 to 3. So you have 3 tasks that it will make a little bit more sense when we go to this next slide. So let's look at an example, short answer question. I just wrote this last night, and I looked through the book and at the learning objectives, and I saw one that I thought might be good for a question on the test. So maybe this will be a short answer question. I don't know. I'll submit it, but it could be a good case. I typically nail during review sessions. So this would basically be the wording that you might see in the question. You come to it, answer all parts of the question, A, B, and C. A, B, and C here make up points that you can get. A is an individual point, B is an individual point, and C is an individual point. So you can earn them independently. If you say something A that is way off base, completely a falsehood, not even historical, then you can still get B and C correct. They don't depend on each other, if you understand what I mean there. So an example here would be to identify one ideology which contributed to the development of imperialism from 1750 to 1900. Your teachers will, and here on Fiveable, we will talk about what it means to identify, describe, and explain. But identify is the simplest task. In this question, you would just be asked to basically name an ideology that contributed to imperialism. It might be nationalism. It might be social Darwinism. It might be missionary ideology, Christian missionary ideology. All you would have to do is say social Darwinism contributed to the development of imperialism. You might define social Darwinism, but you don't have to explain that process. because that word identify is all you need to do. But for B and C, you're asked a little bit more. Explain one way in which new ideologies contributed to imperialism before 1900. So here you have to connect an ideology. It might be what you talked about in A, or it might be a different one. You could maybe talk about social Darwinism in A, but for B, you might explain that, let's say, nationalism contributed to imperialism as countries like Britain and France competed, and you could throw maybe the Netherlands in there, competed for access to markets around the world and access to resources around the world. That the nationalist drive and the pride in one's country led to an acceleration of this process. A few sentences might do it. And then explain one effect of imperialism after 1900. You see how it's, connecting to both these time periods. This would be the question that you might get for question 4 as an option. And you might say this, the competition for imperialism ended up leading to World War I, and you could explain the fight over resources. But that, again, that's explained. So it's a little bit more of a task. If any teachers are watching this, here you go. Take that question. Use it for your class. Hopefully it'll be useful for you. Again, I just found that last night. It's if you look at the key concepts and the learning objectives in this class, students too, if you're wondering what to study, you want to create practice questions for each other or for yourself, really one thing you can do is just look at those learning objectives, see what the College Board says is important and the things they want you to know, and turn those into questions. And if you can answer those, you're going to get things right. All right, so that brings us to the end of what is called Section 1 on the test, which consists of Part A, multiple choice, and Part B, short answer. At that point, you get about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how your school or testing center is with time, to rest. You might be able to get a small snack, depending on the College Board rules this year. But that is generally your time to take a breather and relax. You've done a good bit of writing at this point. You've written for 40 minutes after answering 55 minutes of questions. So that's where you want to catch your breath. But also, you want to put that part of the test behind you. It's done. It's over. You never have to look at an AP World History multiple choice question again. You never have to look at an AP World History short answer question again. And if you're taking further AP history courses, well, maybe next year. But in the meantime, you're done with all that. All that hard work that you put in from now up until exam time, it's paid off already with half of your test. 60% of your score has already been determined, so there's no need to worry about it. It's time to clear your head and think about Part 2. If you have any questions, throw them down in the Ask a Question section. Even if you think that perhaps you don't have a question, but you have something that you know that other people might be wondering, just want to be 100% sure on, feel free to throw it down in the Ask a Question section below and make sure to get to it. Looking at the votes, it looks like things have figured out. Maybe as we go through these, people's votes change on what section of the exam they're most concerned about. And again, if you're watching this interview after the fact, of course, you'll find a lot more resources here on Fiveable that will give you more information about both of those sections of the exam. So that said, no questions down in the chat. We're going to take a look now at Part 2 of the exam, or Section 2 of the exam. And Section 2 of the exam, unlike Section 1, is done in one unbroken period of time. Okay, so Section 2 of the exam will say, here are 2 essays, and you get 100 minutes to do both of them. And we'll give you some time reminders. We'll say, 15-minute reading period's up. You should start writing on the DBQ if you haven't already. 60 minutes is elapsed, so you should probably move on to your LEQ. But there is nothing compelling you to do that. If you have a little bit more to write on your DBQ, you can do that. But just know that time that you're spending on one takes away from your other essay. It is up to you to budget your time on the second part of the test. But a benefit of this is that if you are really strong with one of the essays, you can knock that out quickly before you move on to the second question. So the first one, and the one I think most students really stress out about, is the document-based question. You'll find that we do a lot of work here on Fiveable, tackling document-based questions, tackling sources. As I mentioned, we have a sourcing activity coming up here on Fiveable this week. So this is one that a lot of people kind of get nervous about. But you shouldn't. And here's why. The DBQ will give you a question, and you will be given all of the documents you need to answer that question. Even if you slept through a month of your class, you will have enough documents to perform quite well on this exam if you know and practice the skills that go with the DBQ. It is one question, 7 documents, 60 minutes to answer it. 15 of those minutes are earmarked for reading and planning your essay, and the other 5 for writing. And it does make up a quarter of your, it's the second largest part of your exam score outside of multiple choice questions. So if we think about this DBQ, then, we want to know not just what it is. Right? It's a question usually asking you to evaluate the extent to which some event or process affected society, whatever society it might be. Last year, and you can find these. I'm not going to give you an example, but the past released DBQs are found on the College Board website. You can search the past DBQs. You can find those. And some example scoring. Last year, the essay was on, I graded it. My mind is blanking. The DBQ, or the main DBQ last year, was about Indian Ocean trade and how European involvement changed, or the relationship between Europeans and traders in East and Southeast Asia changed over time, I believe. I'd have to look at it up. I literally read hundreds and hundreds of those essays. Apparently, I've just left it out. But every single one of those essays, we graded the same way. We graded on a 7-point rubric. And so there are certain skills in this rubric of things that you're asked to do. The first 2 points are usually in your introduction. You will write a thesis answering the question based on what you argue from the documents. So this is your argument, your thesis claim, your main idea of your paper, and it will dictate what the rest of the paper looks like. The other point is contextualization. You place what you're writing about in a broader context, and that does require some alternate information. You're going to have to combine what is in these set of documents with your knowledge. Evidence, using evidence on documents, whether or not you demonstrate that you understand and use relevantly 3 documents, get you 1 point. If you support your argument with at least 6 of the 7 documents, you would get a 2nd point for evidence. And if you do that, then you automatically get that 1st point. And then you also need to bring in evidence on the documents. You only have to do this 1 time and you get a point for it. So evidence in total is 3 points. But evidence on documents and contextualization, those are really the only 2 points that come from outside the documents. So you can write a really solid essay, theoretically get a 5 without knowing anything outside of what the essay has told what the College Board is doing. The last 2 points are analysis and reasoning. Are you sourcing the documents, trying to understand how the historical context, the intended audience, the purpose, the view of the author who is writing, how that may affect your argument, strengthen or weaken alternative arguments. If you can explain that with your argument at least 3 times, then you will get that point. And then lastly, complexity. Does your essay demonstrate an overall complex argument? And that might be by example multiple sides of an issue, or multiple sides of a question. It might be a counterclaim that asks you about changes. Have you identified the changes and continuities? Something along those lines. So there be some sort of complexity in the argument, a theme throughout your paper. That would be probably the hardest point to get on this essay, because it's a very high level skill it's meant to be. But this essay is certainly accessible if you are practicing it during the year. The LEQ, the next or the final lesson that you're going to arrive at. When you get to this, you do the DBQ first, which in this section, by the way, you don't have to do them in this order. You can do them out of order, although since the DBQ is worth more, I usually caution my students against doing that. I say, tackle the DBQ first, then go at the LEQ, unless you just find that the DBQ is taking you way too much time. You need to jot down stuff in the LEQ. So the long essay question is in section 2 of the exam. Remember, it's together with the DBQ. And this is one of the best things. You get to the end of the exam, you're tired. You had 55 minutes multiple choice questions. You had 40 minutes of short answer questions. You got to breathe. And then they came out with the DBQ. And now you got 40 minutes left to write another essay. But they give you a choice. There are 3 options to the LEQ. And you get to choose from those 3 options. And you only have to answer one of the questions. Again, no bonus for going overboard. You don't get extra points for answering the hard question. Simply put, choose the one that you know best. It's 15% of the score overall. And it is graded on out of 7 points with a 6-point rubric. Just like the DBQ, thesis and contextualization are important. You're going to have evidence, except in the long essay question, that evidence comes from your head. It does not come from anywhere else. So you have to come up with specific examples of evidence. If you use those to support an argument or support your thesis, then you're going to be in good shape. You're going to get those 2 points. Then if you use a historical reasoning skill, and those skills are by the College Board, and skills that you'll be using in class, whether it is the skill of chronology, causation, cause and effect, understanding change in continuity, how things change over time, probably stay the same, and why, be part of that, why things, why a specific event caused another event, or how they were connected in cause and effect. And then lastly, comparison, comparing and contrasting, and explaining why things may have been the same in 2 places, or why they might be different. So if you demonstrate that historical reasoning skill and do that analysis that explains the answer how or why, then you're going to get that point. And then lastly, again, probably the hardest point on this essay too is complexity. So that would mean that you have a really complete, strong argument when it came to, say, asking you about continuities, but then you also may have identified changes as well, and a strong argument with those. And if you do that, that's one way to demonstrate complexity. Although there are others, and those will be covered in some DBQ videos. I have some videos on my YouTube channel talking about that as well. And we have plenty of stuff here on Fiveable. So what I did with this section 2 is I just combined these strategies. So because they're both essay writing, and they both are dealing with essays in this one kind of chunk of time at the end of the test. So here are the strategies that I think are extremely important when you start working with DBQ and LEQ. And you will probably start these fairly early in your classes. Number 1, read the question carefully. The most common mistake or one of the most common mistakes I see is people don't read the questions carefully, and they aren't looking at the right keywords in the question. You know, what historical things they being asked to do? Are they writing about the region of the world? There's a difference in South and Southeast Asia. You have to know that for your AP. Is it, are you writing the right time period? And some essays will ask from 1450 to 1750. Some will say 1750 to 1950. There's a difference. One year I was at the LEQ and asked about labor migration from 1450 to 1750. Well, in my class, I taught a lot about labor migration in the next unit, 1750 to 1900. And I was seeing the case with a lot of other classes. People had not really paid much attention to that date when they were writing out of the time period. So it's really hard to get. And those simple mistakes can't get you if you're not reading the questions carefully. And what I like to do is when I go through a question, I underline any action word asked to do, evaluate the extent to which, analyze continuities. I underline those. I usually underline the region, circle the region of the world, and star the date. That's just something that I do. The second thing, not only do you want to read the questions carefully so you can answer the question as it is asked, but you also want to, and folks, you're not going to memorize it, I promise you. You're at least term. That's going to be something that comes with time. The essays do tell you what you have to do, and the rubric is there in a format, but it might not be easy to understand what your teacher give you in class. So you need to know and learn and remember what you include. Your thesis, if it's LEQ, it's contextualization, using lots of evidence, using a historical thinking skill, and adding some complexity. Also budget your time. The DBQ is more the LEQ, but the LEQ still matters 50% of the exam. That essay itself almost as much as all of the SAQs together. And then make sure that you practice, right? You have now, I haven't even created my countdown clock, so I can't go to it right now and show you. But you have till May, sometime May 17th or 18th or 15th or something around this time, to prepare. And that's a lot of time. Usually it breaks down to about 150 days of class. Practice. In class, your teachers tell you to get writing that LEQ, write a thesis statement or write a paragraph, attack, do it with purpose. Because every time you practice it and get feedback in class or even here on Fiveable, you're going to get a little bit better. Will there be setbacks? Yes, but overall, you're going to get a better understanding. A lot of books, I think one of the most valuable things in review books that you get are just simply the questions. They basically all have the same information in it, but practice questions, especially essays, I think are very important. And so if you're practicing on your own, get a book that not only has practice essays, but even has sample essays that you can take a look at to see if you did some of the things well. Of course, the college website has come out with a lot of helpful materials. Your teachers may be using that with you in your classroom if they set that up. And the College Board website also puts released essays on their website. So not all essays people take are released, but the main essays from last year, the DBQ and LEQ, have been released. You can take a look all the way back to the beginning of the course, although only for about the last 3 or 4 years it's been in this new format. So if you go back any further, just use caution and check with your teacher before you do that. And then last thing, practice. We're going to have a lot of practice here on Fiveable, so we encourage you, if you're not a member, to join. Just enjoy those free streams until you feel moved to join this awesome community. So with that practice comes you putting yourself out there, you putting your writing out there, and allowing it to be judged by someone. And that's a tough thing to do for high school. I'll say it's a tough thing to do as an adult. I write emails to people, I pour over them, sending my writing to the world. But you're writing, we know as your teacher that this is a draft. We're asking you to do this in a very amount of time. Nowhere well, most people ask you to write an essay on a random topic in 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. But you're asked here. So know that it's a draft and be okay if you don't do things well. The key is to teacher feedback. Your teachers and the people we may interact with Fiveable here know what writing looks like, what they're looking for. So remember that the advice that you're being given is designed not to feel bad, but to prepare you. And so be open to that feedback. Don't get too down on yourself. Try to find something you did well, something you can do better for the next time. You'll see improvement. And I really think that is something that if you can go in with that attitude of getting better, open to that feedback, I promise you, you'll see good results. I've seen it out of students time and again. Some students might feel, well, I'm not going to look at this because I think I can do it the right way, and they get a little disappointed. That student who was getting those low scores was improving. He started out with a 2 and then got a 3, and by the end they were getting a 4. It really paid off the test because we hit it out of the park on that last day. And part of that being feedback, you're practicing writing these statements a lot, presumably in your classes. Learn to write it. We're going to be doing in Fiveable. Your thesis is your guide. Learn to write it, and you'll be surprised at how much that will open up in your essay. If you write a strong thesis, you're much more likely not only to get that point, but you're most likely to use your evidence to support it, and you're also likely to get your argumentative claim or your analysis for using historical thinking skills. All right. So if we had any questions, nobody's put a question down in here. Small group tonight. Nobody really ready to share questions. Of course, this is kind of a basic topic, and of course, we'll go a little bit deeper in subsequent videos and subsequent events here. Start to look at these questions. So, if you have any, you can go in the chat if you like, and I will certainly be able to answer those for you. But hopefully, this makes you just a little bit more, or a little less scared or worried about what is to come. It's a lot. There's a lot here, but it is manageable. Remember, you're going to be practicing all year for this, and ultimately, you will conquer. You will hope, as we all hope, get that 5. You will succeed in this exam. So that's pretty much it for the World History exams, exam basics. Again, my name is Patrick Lassiter. Check me out on Twitter, hit share, take a look at some of my videos on YouTube, especially the ones for the second half of the course periods 4, 5, and 6. A little bit of 4, 5, and 6 if you need extra help. I will be back with you probably in a couple of weeks when we start looking at content and revolution. I'm also going to come in and talk with some of your students about their advice for the World History exam coming up pretty soon. Don't forget that we have sessions of the week. We have tomorrow, we got them Friday, and we got them tomorrow, Thursday, and we have one this Saturday. So best of luck to you as you start this journey this year for the AP World History exam. This was useful to you, and I will see you next time. AP World History.